You know what absolutely infuriates me? When WWE creative sits in their ivory tower and thinks they can just throw together two of the most dangerous men on the planet without any consequences, without any warning, and expect us to just sit here and accept the chaos that follows. Because what went down backstage between Brock Lesnar and Jacob Fatu wasn't just a brawl, it was a declaration of war that WWE is trying to sweep under the rug. Let me paint you the picture of what really happened, because trust me, what you saw on television was maybe 20% of the absolute carnage that took place behind those curtains. And the fact that WWE is downplaying this? That should tell you everything you need to know about how terrified they are of what they've unleashed. Brock Lesnar, the beast incarnate, the man who conquered The Undertaker's streak, the man who legitimately makes grown competitors check their contracts before agreeing to face him, decided that Jacob Fatu had disrespected him for the last time. And Jacob Fatu, the Samoan werewolf, the most unhinged member of the bloodline, the man who puts his body through tables and concrete for fun, wasn't about to back down from anyone, including a legitimate UFC heavyweight champion. Here's where it gets really interesting, and this is what WWE doesn't want you talking about. Sources backstage, people who were literally running for cover, told me that this wasn't some scripted segment that got out of hand. This was Brock Lesnar going completely off script and hunting Jacob Fatu down like prey after Fatu allegedly made comments about Lesnar being past his prime and scared to face real Samoans during a production meeting earlier that day. Can you imagine the audacity? Jacob Fatu, as absolutely incredible and terrifying as he is, looked at Brock Lesnar and essentially called him washed up, to his face, in front of producers, writers, and other talent. Now, whether you think Lesnar is past his prime or not, you don't poke a bear with a stick and expect it to just waddle away. You don't challenge a man who has made a career out of legitimately hurting people and think there won't be consequences. According to multiple witnesses, Lesnar was in his private locker room, which by the way is apparently the size of most people's apartments because when you're Brock Lesnar you get those kind of perks, when he heard about what Fatu said. And instead of going through proper channels, instead of talking to Paul Heyman, instead of letting Triple H or creative handle it, Lesnar did what Lesnar does best. He went hunting. The gorilla position was reportedly the first place he checked. Then catering. Then the trainer's room. Lesnar was stalking through the backstage area like a horror movie villain, and people were literally texting each other warnings. Brock's on the warpath. Stay out of the hallways. Lesnar's looking for Fatu. It was like something out of an action thriller, except this was real life with real consequences and real injuries potentially on the line. Now Jacob Fatu, to his credit, wasn't hiding. The Samoan werewolf doesn't hide from anyone. He was in the Bloodline's locker room with Solo Sikoa and Tama Tonga, probably talking strategy, probably watching tape, completely unaware that a 286-pound former UFC champion was about to kick down their door like the Kool-Aid Man on steroids. And that's exactly what happened. Witnesses say Lesnar didn't knock, didn't announce himself. Just boom, door flies open, and before anyone could react, Brock had Jacob Fatu by the throat and drove him through an equipment table. Not a breakaway table. Not a gimmick table designed to collapse safely. An actual, legitimate equipment table loaded with monitors and cables and production gear that exploded into 1,000 pieces on impact. Solo Sikoa and Tama Tonga immediately jumped in, because that's what family does. But here's the thing that people need to understand. When Brock Lesnar goes into that mode, when that switch flips and the legitimate fighter comes out, it doesn't matter how many people are in the room. He's been in there with Francis Ngannou. He's trained with the best heavyweight fighters on the planet. 2 more bodies just means 2 more targets. Lesnar hit Solo with a German suplex on the concrete floor. Not the padded wrestling mats. The actual concrete. And Tama Tonga caught an F5 that sent him crashing into a stack of road cases so hard that the entire stack collapsed like dominoes. All of this in the span of maybe 30 seconds. This wasn't a wrestling match. This was a legitimate fighter clearing a room. But here's where Jacob Fatu proved exactly why he's called the werewolf, why he's the most dangerous member of the bloodline, why Roman Reigns himself handpicked him for this faction. Most people would have stayed down after being driven through a table by Brock Lesnar. Most people would have tapped out mentally. Not Jacob Fatu. That man got up with a look in his eyes that witnesses described as absolutely terrifying and went right back at Lesnar. What followed was apparently 5 minutes of the most intense, most brutal, most real fighting that backstage area has ever seen. These two titans were throwing each other into walls, into doors, into anything that wasn't bolted down. Fatu hit Lesnar with a chair so hard the chair bent in half. Lesnar responded by launching Fatu into a vending machine with such force that the entire machine tipped over and hundreds of dollars worth of drinks and snacks spilled across the floor. Security tried to intervene. Referees tried to intervene. Producers tried to intervene. Nothing worked. It took a combination of Adam Pearce, several road agents, and finally Triple H himself physically stepping between them to even pause the violence. And even then, even with the coup of WWE standing there, both Lesnar and Fatu were still trying to get at each other, still screaming, still absolutely furious. The aftermath? A destroyed locker room. Thousands of dollars in damaged equipment. Solo Sikoa potentially nursing a legitimate injury from that German suplex on concrete. Tama Tonga with what looked like a very real limp after that F5 into the road cases. And Jacob Fatu with what sources are calling a legitimate shoulder injury that he's refusing to get properly checked because he doesn't want to show any weakness. But here's what WWE did. They cut away from anything happening backstage. They didn't acknowledge it on commentary. They pretended like this nuclear explosion of violence never happened. Why? Because they can't control it. Because this wasn't part of the script. Because when you have two legitimate tough guys who decide they want to fight for real, all the writers and producers and corporate structure in the world can't stop it. And now WWE has a massive problem on their hands. Do they turn this into a storyline and risk more legitimate violence? Do they keep them separated and disappoint fans who are going to hear about this brawl through social media anyway? Do they punish Lesnar for going off script, knowing full well that Brock Lesnar doesn't care about punishment because he's made more money than most of the roster combined? Do they punish Fatu for the comments that started this whole thing, potentially damaging the bloodline storyline that's been carrying the company? There's also the matter of Paul Heyman, who reportedly had zero knowledge this was about to happen. Heyman, the advocate, the special counsel, the man who knows Brock Lesnar better than anyone, was completely blindsided. Sources say Heyman was actually in guerrilla position when this went down and immediately rushed backstage, not to hype it up, not to cut a promo, but to legitimately try to calm Lesnar down before someone got seriously injured or worse. The relationship between Lesnar and Heyman has been the most consistent thing in WWE for over 2 decades, but even that was tested when Heyman couldn't talk Lesnar down. Even that legendary bond couldn't overcome the rage that Lesnar felt after being disrespected. And that should terrify everyone in WWE, because if Paul Heyman can't control Brock Lesnar, if Paul Heyman can't talk sense into the beast incarnate, then who can? Let's talk about what this means for the bloodline. Roman Reigns is on top of the mountain. Solo Sikoa has been positioned as his enforcer, his right hand. Jacob Fatu was brought in specifically to add more muscle, more intimidation, more dominance. But how does the bloodline recover from this? How do they maintain their aura of invincibility when Jacob Fatu just got demolished by a part-timer? How do they keep the mystique alive when Solo Sikoa got German suplexed on concrete and Tama Tonga got F5D into next week? Some people are going to say this makes Fatu look weak. I completely disagree. The fact that Jacob Fatu got back up and went toe-to-toe with Brock Lesnar, the fact that he didn't back down, the fact that it took the boss of WWE to physically separate them, that makes Fatu look like even more of a monster. This isn't someone who got squashed. This is someone who survived a legitimate encounter with one of the most dangerous human beings in combat sports history and still wanted more. But WWE's handling of this is absolutely unforgivable. You have gold here. You have real animosity. You have real tension. You have two guys who legitimately want to hurt each other, which is the one thing you can't script, the one thing you can't fake, the one thing that makes wrestling feel real. And instead of capitalizing on it, instead of building to the biggest money match of the year, WWE is pretending it didn't happen because they're scared. They're scared of liability. They're scared of legitimate injuries. They're scared of losing control of their perfectly scripted, perfectly sanitized, perfectly boring product. And you know what? That's exactly what's wrong with modern wrestling. The moments that feel most real, the moments that actually get people talking, are the moments that happen when the script gets thrown out the window. Think about the greatest moments in WWE history. Austin hitting McMahon with the bedpan, the Montreal Screwjob, CM Punk's pipe bomb. These were moments that felt real because they either were real or were so close to real that the line got blurred. That's what we had here. That's what Lesnar versus Fatu could be. A feud that feels legitimate because it is legitimate. Instead, WWE is going to probably issue some corporate statement about maintaining a professional environment and not condoning real violence while simultaneously marketing every other storyline as the most brutal, most intense, most personal feud in WWE history. The hypocrisy is stunning. You can't claim to want edge, claim to want attitude, claim to want reality, and then clutch your pearls when reality actually shows up unannounced and starts throwing people through tables. The wrestling business has always been at its best when the line between work and shoot gets blurred, when fans can't tell what's real and what's scripted, when the emotions feel authentic because they are authentic. Brock Lesnar isn't acting when he looks like he wants to tear someone's head off. Fatu isn't acting when he has that unhinged look in his eyes. These are real competitors with real egos and real pride, and when you put them in the same building, sometimes real things happen. WWE needs to figure out what they want to be. Do they want to be a family-friendly entertainment company that plays it safe and never takes risks? Or do they want to be the wild, unpredictable, anything-can-happen wrestling promotion that made them famous in the first place? Because right now, they're trying to be both, and it's not working. The talent roster is more stacked than it's been in years. The production value is through the roof. The international expansion is massive. But the one thing WWE seems to have lost is that edge, that danger, that feeling that you have to watch because you never know what's going to happen. Well, something happened. Something real happened. And they're sweeping it under the rug. Mark my words, this isn't over. You don't have an encounter like this and just move on. Brock Lesnar doesn't forget disrespect. Fatu doesn't forget getting ambushed. Solo Sikoa doesn't forget getting German suplexed on concrete. The bloodline doesn't forget threats to their family. This is going to explode again, either backstage, or in the ring, or both. And when it does, WWE better be ready to capitalize on it instead of running away scared. The Beast versus the Werewolf. The Conqueror versus the Samoan Wrecking Machine. The most dangerous free agent in sports entertainment versus the most unhinged member of wrestling's most dominant faction. This is the match. This is the feud. This is the money. WWE just needs to have the courage to embrace it.